All right, good afternoon, everyone.
Tony, are you set? We're set, okay.
Good afternoon, and I have my favorite little speech. I want you to listen very closely. Okay. Once again, I pledge to work cooperatively and professionally with Governor Rauner. Once again, number one problem facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit. I don't think you can just cut your way out of the budget deficit. As a matter of fact, in the case of the governor's cuts-only budget, you can see severe reductions in medical services for the elderly, the disabled, and for struggling families. I feel that we need a balanced approach, some cuts, some new revenue. And as a matter of fact, the legislature has already passed a bill that would reduce Medicaid spending by $400 million. The spending plan that I support, and that plan has been sent to the governor for his consideration, helps and protects middle-class families by supporting local schools, local police, and local road programs. The governor's advocacy of non-budget issues works against the core beliefs of both Democrats and Republicans that the government ought not to be in the business of reducing wages and the standard of living. And the government should not be forcing injured workers to go on welfare or to go to the emergency room. The governor's advocacy of these non-budget issues takes this work to reduce the budget deficit to the extreme, takes it away from the moderation that we will need in order to solve the budget deficit, and moves away from a requirement that everybody be reasonable in this process. I want to call attention to two events that happened today. For the fifth time, the Rauner Republicans in the House were given an opportunity to vote for a real estate tax freeze. And for the fifth time, the Rauner Republicans in the House declined to take advantage of that opportunity to vote for a real estate tax freeze. There have been 5 occasions in the House where if the Rauner Republicans had voted for the real estate tax freeze, that bill would be in the Senate, including today. Number 2 is another effort to show cooperation with the governor. We passed the governor's version of the privatization of the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. The bill is basically in agreement with what the governor advanced to us and what he advocated to us. There were certain amendments offered by the Democrats which the governor may not agree with, including the one that would provide for a 3-year sunset. But for the third time, we've taken action in the House to show the governor that we're interested in working with him to solve the problems that are before the legislature. I would repeat, his advocacy of these non-budget issues is not helpful to solving the problem of the budget deficit. It takes the functioning to the extreme, takes it away from moderation. Despite that, in 3 instances, we've made a good faith effort to show him that we're prepared to work with him. We passed a bill on workers' compensation. Today we passed a bill that privatizes the operations of DECIO, and we've given the Rauner Republicans in the House 5 opportunities to vote for a real estate tax freeze. Questions?
Mr. Speaker, I'm an outlier because things are really not crystal clear to me. I know they're crystal clear to everybody else, but not to me. We haven't seen the governor a lot in the last few weeks, and I'm wondering if, from your perspective, what's changed in the last few weeks? Because you keep saying he operates in the extreme, you operate in moderation, etc. I'm wondering if what he has done that maybe has doubled down on some of his extreme positions in your mind, maybe since last week or 2 weeks ago.
I would just say that his conduct through this effort to eliminate the budget deficit, where he's advocating these non-budget issues, is functioning in the extreme. It's not functioning in moderation that's going to be needed to solve the problem of the budget deficit, which is the #1 problem facing the state of Illinois.
So
that's the #1 reason why we're here.
So he hasn't done anything differently. He is still on that position, and according to you, he has not moved?
Well, I would simply repeat what I said. I mean, we know these facts. I don't think the facts are in dispute. I continue to argue that we ought to be about the business of eliminating the budget deficit. That's the number one problem affecting the state.
Mr.
Speaker,
Speaker, would
what
you vote
happened
for
with
a?
the CPS pension bill? There was talk this morning that
It,
there was perhaps an agreement between you and the speaker, or the governor and the mayor.
There would appear as if there was an agreement, it just didn't get enough votes to pass. That's the American system of government.
Will we see it come up again before?
Our plan is to call that next Tuesday and to work between now and then to secure enough votes for it to pass.
Are you
What
confident
can
that
change
you
between
killed
now
it?
and then?
We'll get back.
What can change between now and then?
Everybody can come together in moderation, not in the extreme, and work to find votes to pass the bill. I'm sure it can be done, but we need everybody working together. That's what we need, okay?
The governor's office put out a statement saying that Speaker Madigan wanted to kill this pension bill and instructed the Chicago Democrats to vote
See, here's another example of people operating in the extreme, right? So this is not a non-contentious bill. This is not a non-contentious bill. There's controversy as part of this bill. And yes, there's an agreement in principle among the mayor and the governor and the legislative leaders, but it needs some work. And to be issuing extreme press statements in the middle of the consideration of the bill is not helpful. It's not helpful. It's not how you do things in the legislature.
It needs some work on the bill itself or on the
It
whole
needs
bill?
some work on persuading people that this is the right thing to do.
Did you instruct any House Democrats to vote no on this?
We don't instruct anybody to do anything. You know that. You know, we try to work cooperatively with people and professionally.
You instructed me.
Right. Well, you deserve special consideration.
Mr. Speaker, would you vote for a bill on which the sponsor stood and said, I do not support this amendment?
Well, I think you're trying to take us into a discussion about the votes that we've been calling in the House. And let me repeat what I've said in the past. These are real votes. Republicans characterize these votes as sham votes. These are real votes. If the Rauner Republicans in the House had taken advantage of the 5 opportunities given to them, the real estate tax freeze would be in the real estate tax freeze bill would be in the Senate. It'd be halfway home. So they can say what they want to say, but these are real votes.
The governor clearly wants to have the prevailing wage option for local governments on a freeze bill. He looks at that clearly as a budgetary thing because it helps local governments spend less on projects.
Right. Well.
So do you view the prevailing wage as, why don't you see that as a budgetary issue?
The governor's advocacy of that issue has received close to 0 support in the House. I would say again, these are real votes. So on that question today, there were, I think, over 71 no votes on that question, including some Republicans. So there were certain Republicans voting against the governor's position, which is another advocacy of a non-budget issue when we should be focused on eliminating the #1 problem facing the state of Illinois, the budget deficit.
It's
Speaker,
not
I want
just-
to know the last time that you have spoken with the governor himself about any of these issues, particularly this ad about you's got an extension. So have you had the opportunity to tell him, hey, I'm not really fond of that yet?
Well, I wouldn't offer my comment or my opinion on his ad. I would simply tell him, I think you're operating in the extreme here. That's what I think you're doing. And why don't we all come into a position of moderation and get these problems solved?
When did you told him that? When did you last speak with him, not staff, but you?
Yeah, I understand. Our personal conversation was some days ago. I don't recall exactly when, but it's not so long ago. I don't think it was weeks. Not so long ago.
So what contingency plans have you considered if there isn't a budget in place by July 1st?
My recommendation is that there be a budget in place by July 1. Okay, that'd be my recommendation, and there's a spending plan on the governor's desk today. He could approve that as is. He could veto outright, he could approve some parts and disapprove other parts. He's got a variety of options given to him by the Constitution, and my recommendation would be to use all the options provided to you by the Constitution. But don't go to a government shutdown.
Next week
Since we
is
last
Tu-
saw-
next week is
Here,
Tuesday.
right here, right here.
Since we last saw you last week, what progress has been made on the budget issue since you say that's what we should be focusing on? Whether behind the scenes, stuff that we can't see? 'Cause it doesn't look like there's any movement.
We've released all of the budget bills to the governor. And of course, the governor and the governor's office have been familiar with these bills for several weeks. So they're now on his desk. They're in a position where, as I explained, he has a variety of options. So approve, outright veto, reduction vetoes, line item vetoes. That's all provided in the Constitution. And my recommendation to him would be to take advantage of the powers given to him in the Constitution.
And he
Next
hasn't
week-
done- He hasn't done one of those things. Why hasn't he gotten out the veto stamp or pen or whatever it is? Why hasn't he done any of those things?
Well, that'd be a good question for you to put to the governor when you see him.
Oh, I'd love to.
Next Tuesday is June 30th. So you only have 1 week left. Will there be more of a sense of urgency in the next week? Will we see lawmakers come back before Tuesday, the deadline day? What's going to be happening in the next week?
Speaking for myself, I'm going to continue to work on eliminating the budget deficit. That's what I'm going to work on, because I think that's the number one issue facing the state of Illinois. I don't plan to speak for the other members of the legislature. You know, we work very cooperatively with the Democratic members of the House. We attempt to work cooperatively with the Republican members of the House. But speaking for myself, I'm going to be focused on the elimination of the budget deficit.
Will that include a new revenue bill?
I'm working on the elimination of the budget deficit. As I've explained, you know, from day one, I don't think you can just cut your way out of the budget. I think it requires some cuts and some new revenue.
Do you
But
think,
what will that
do you think
revenue look like?
What would be for revenue?
I think that taxation should be predicated upon the ability to pay.
So millionaire's
Income
amendment
tax?
or what?
No, I just think as a general proposition, the taxation should be predicated upon the ability to pay.
Do you think the governor sees it to his advantage in some way if there is a shutdown, a partial shutdown? Do you want that?
I just don't know. I clearly would not recommend a government shutdown.
What's
I
your
just don't
position
think
on-
that should happen. It hurts and harms too many people.
local government bankruptcy, what's your position on that? The Tribune editorialized again today saying Chicago public school system should be able to go bankrupt.
Well, I guess it's all settled then.
Well, I mean, I'm asking, what is your position on local government bankruptcy?
We don't even need a bill. The Tribune really said that? We don't need a bill. It's all settled.
If
I
you
don't have any
a
position.
on
No,
legislation,
I don't have any position on that.
Do you have a philosophical position?
No. You know me, I'm not a philosopher, you know that.
Speaker, it's great having you down here so often, but
Right.
why is it? Why are we seeing a change in your habits and frequency?
Question it.
Yeah. It could change.
As chairman of the
No?
With Senator Sullivan leaving, and others who may be under attack with people, you know, the governor recruiting candidates, as chairman of the Democratic Party, your thoughts on how is 2016 looking for, you know, holding on to the seats you got in the House, et cetera, and the Senate?
Oh, I think the next general election will be a good election for Democrats.
Because,
They will, the people of the state will have 2 years to see a Republican governor functioning in the extreme, not in moderation. They'll have a chance to vote for national issues, and you'll have the Democratic advocacy of Democratic positions nationally. I think that heavy majority of Illinoisans support those Democratic positions at the national level, and they'll support Democrats at the state level, because they will see Democrats functioning and operating in moderation, trying to solve the number one issue facing the state of Illinois, which is the budget deficit, in a balanced approach. Not an extreme approach, but a balanced approach. Some cuts, some new revenue.
You know, the governor likes to say that everybody, or at least those who vote for him, elect him to lead the state. You know, even though maybe some lawmakers were not put here to listen to the governor, but to represent their, you know, their people, I would say they're here to represent their people, not to listen to the governor. The governor says, no, I'm the leader. I'm here to lead the state. Is Is there something that the governor doesn't get, or that maybe he believes that you don't?
Look, I would simply say that, as you know, the governor has certain views that relate to government and politics, and people in the legislature have different views. And the nature of the American governmental system is that you bring all these conflicting views and ideas together in a forum like the legislature, and if everybody's working reasonably and in moderation, you'll get a good result out of the interaction. The problem occurs when people are operating and functioning in the extreme. And that's why I'm recommending that everybody be reasonable about this, and everybody function in moderation. And if they do, we'll get a good result in terms of our efforts to eliminate the budget deficit, which is the #1 issue facing the state of Illinois.
Did you ask Leader Durkin to put X number of votes on that bill today?
I didn't speak directly with Mr. Durkin, but the staffs talked back and forth about the number.
Was there a recommendation that they put 16 votes on?
That wasn't my recommendation, no.
What's your recommendation?
I don't think I'm going to share that right now. It might appear in the Tribune editorial.
Speaker,
You don't read it anyway.
given the governor's comments about the budget that was put on, now on his desk, doesn't seem like he likes it much. So are you working on any sort of backup plan, or would you recommend a short-term, say, 1-month budget if he does veto it?
I would simply restate, the governor's got lots of options under the Constitution. Prior governors used all of those options. They used all of those options, and he ought to do the same thing. So using those options, reduction veto, line item veto, approval of bills, why he could fashion a spending plan that would probably be very acceptable to him. Now, the legislature would have an opportunity to move to override those vetoes. But those are the options that are available to him. And here again, he has the opportunity to function in moderation or in the extreme. Real clear choices there. And he can make his choice, and then we'll go forward. But again, if he's interested, in my opinion, function in moderation, take advantage of those options that are available.
If the worst happens and we hit July 1st and enter a partial shutdown, will we still be in the same sort of Tuesday continuous session? Will things get more urgent? Yeah. Will you start to call the House back on a daily basis? What will happen?
Yeah. As I've told you before, the House will be in continuous session through the summer. And the number of days in Springfield will be determined as we go step by step. I don't know what the schedule will be for those days as we move forward, but the important point is the House will be in continuous session through the summer because we want to be here to work on solving the problem of the budget deficit.
The governor wants these 5 issues. You say that his issues are not very popular among constituents and lawmakers. So where do negotiations then start if he wants these 5 issues before revenue increase, your budget needs a revenue increase?
Yeah. They start in moderation. That's where they start. And that's where they end.
How do we get to moderation?
But again, remember, if you're functioning in the extreme and you're recommending proposals to the legislature that are going to reduce the wages of middle-class people and reduce the standard of living of middle-class people, you're going to run into some stiff resistance from the legislature, both Democrats and Republicans. That's why better everybody be reasonable.
What is this moderation all about? I mean, can I work with you in moderation and not agree with you all the time?
Yeah.
Is moderation code for do it my way all the time?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Again, I've been through a lot of these negotiations in the past. I've worked with different governors, and there can be agreements, there can be solutions to these problems, but you can't be extreme. You can't be unreasonable.
Do you think Bruce Rauner is making a rookie mistake, essentially, then? Are you saying that the reason we're in this is because He doesn't know what he's doing?
No, I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna get into stuff like that. You know, I'm just not gonna do that.
Do the Democrats have a chance to win the 18th congressional district at all, and are you taking sides as chairman in that race for Aaron Schock's seat?
Well, I think that the Democrats will be competitive. I think they'll be competitive. The issues in the congressional election will relate to the federal government, but there'll be an opportunity for people to choose between Democrats and Republicans, and to take into consideration everything that are before the voters when they vote, both federal and state issues.
But right after July 4th and then a Thursday for the general, it doesn't seem to me like, I mean, it just seems kind of queer in terms of trying to get people interested in voting. By queer, I mean odd, unusual. Do you sense any problems in trying to get people interested in getting out and voting for somebody in the 18th district right after the 4th of July weekend, and then on the unusual day of a Thursday right after Labor Day, if I'm not mistaken?
You know, it could be that everybody will be filled with patriotic thoughts because of the 4th of July, and therefore they'll march to the polling places. Let's hope so.
I was gonna cut this off unless, whether you ask a question as well.
I'll try to.
Do your best.
The governor is, one could say, trying to engage in horse trading. You say that these are not, his priorities are not budget related. What incentive do the Democrats have to take up his agenda once they get their budget? If he says tomorrow, okay, we'll talk about the budget, you know, what guarantee does he have that his proposals will be taken seriously after that?
Our prior good faith actions in passing a workers' compensation bill, passing a bill today to privatize the operations of DECIO, providing 5 opportunities for the Rauner Republicans in the House to vote for real estate tax freeze. I and House Democrats have developed a record over the last several weeks. And we can rely upon that record to show our good faith interest in working cooperatively, professionally, reasonably, in moderation to solve the #1 problem facing the state of Illinois, the budget deficit.
Does all of this look bad for Illinois? I mean, yet again, no budget battles, it seems like.
Well, there is a spending plan on the governor's desk, all right? And the governor has an option to outright veto, which takes several steps towards a government shutdown. He doesn't have to do that. He's got all those options provided by the Constitution, and he can use those, and he can fashion a spending plan that permits the government to continue to function, continue to operate, and avoids a government shutdown.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.